Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Voice Coffee Break. On this episode, we're continuing the discussion around diversity and inclusion in the voice industry, both in terms of design, but also in terms of the industry itself. How can we be making the industry as voice a more diverse place to work in? And in this episode, I am so thrilled to have had this conversation with Ethan Richardson, another Brit, black man who has moved abroad to continue his career both in voice and consulting, living in Romania. And he is going to talk to us all about his experience in terms of voice design, diversity, inclusion, and everything in between. I hope you're going to enjoy this conversation. So here is my chat with Ethan Richardson, conversation and voice designer, here on Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter. And if you are enjoying this session, I would really encourage you to like, subscribe, and share it wherever you're watching it. And let us know if we can do anything else to help move this conversation forward during these unsettling but triumphant times as we see this global movement rise up to fight inherent racism. I hope you'll join us in that journey. Okay, here's my chat with Ethan Richardson, and I'm so excited to share this one with you. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter, CEO and co-founder at Vixen Labs. And this is another video in a series that we are doing looking all around the issues of diversity and inclusion in the world of voice technology and the conversational industries at large. And my guest this episode is Ethan Richardson, who is a conversational architect and voice developer and designer, as well as has an extensive career working in consulting, and joins us down the line this morning when I'm recording, but whenever you're watching this from I think you're in Romania. Whereabouts are you, Ethan? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi James, I'm actually in Bucharest, Romania, so Eastern Europe. So it's quite sunny outside, so it's a good day.
But I can tell from that accent, I don't think you hail from Bucharest. So maybe just tell us a little bit, Ethan, where you're from and what your background is.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Birmingham in the UK, and I moved to Romania. I think it's coming up to now 5 years. So before that, I worked in IT in the UK for about 10 plus years. And then for family reasons, we decided to move out to sunny Bucharest. And it's been a really interesting journey. And glad to be here to talk to you about it.
And you got to move out there to work for one of the big consulting firms. And during that time, you've also started this career in voice. So just tell us a little bit about kind of where your voice career got started. How did you get interested in this field in the beginning?
Yep. So I used to work in legacy development, which is like green and black screen, really boring stuff. You don't want to go into it. And I basically heard about Facebook Messenger at the time was releasing its API for chatbots, and I decided just to, play about with that. I was doing a bit of stuff with Raspberry Pi before that, so I was really interested in dabbling and in breaking stuff and finding out how things work.
Sure.
And then basically I just started to develop chatbots from there. And then Alexa came out, and it was like this massive black tube, the first generation. And
I've still got one in the other room.
Yeah, I didn't take any notice of it, to be honest with you. I just thought, oh yeah, it's nice. Not many developers were on it, and I just just basically put it to the side. And then obviously, everybody knows what's happened since then. And I've started to develop some ideas, some POCs. And it's really caught my imagination in terms of what you can do with the power of voice. I kept on developing me POCs in my own time, staying up all night, as you can imagine, doing development, and just thinking about what the possibilities were for voice, especially here in Romania. Like, it's not a thing at all.
Yes.
I think the adoption is like less than 2% or something like that.
I think many people watching, particularly if you're in the US or other markets, you may not even know you can't even buy an Amazon Echo device out there in Romania right now.
Exactly.
So pretty limited.
Yeah, all of the devices come from Germany or are imported. So when you ask somebody on the street what is Amazon, they don't even know what Amazon is. So let alone Alexa. So most people use Siri on their phone to just do navigation, but it's very a very early stage market in terms of asking people to think about voice. So in a way, there aren't any developers here to note of who are developing for even Samsung Bixby or Google Assistant. Just there's nobody. So it's a lonely place to be, but at the same time, because of the joys of the internet, I'm speaking to people all over the world. I mean, today I've just been speaking to somebody in New Zealand, and also last night somebody in India, and yesterday 2 people in the US. So, you know, voice is global, so I don't feel that lonely anymore.
Well, that's good to know. You've managed to find
Yeah,
some, parts of the community all around
yeah,
the world. I mean, I'm recording this day before the Voice Global conference, which I'm sure you'll be following along with tomorrow and participating in. And
yeah,
I think one of the big things we've seen is this community has really rallied to the crisis of what's been presented by COVID, and trying to really kind of bring some different perspectives. So good to know that you're not alone in that
yeah,
in Bucharest.
yeah,
And so we're obviously recording this in the wake of the past couple of weeks of mass outcries when it comes to the issues around Black Lives Matter and the systemic racism that we have seen at kind of large scale. Just tell us a little bit about what your own experience has been as a Black man working in development, and particularly in these kind of big corporate organizations, as well as also doing your own projects. What has your journey been like, and how are you reacting to what you're seeing right now in terms of the global movement?
yeah. So going back to my experience in the UK, because it was mainly legacy development, my colleagues were like, I was the only person of color in those companies. So I got used to working with different people from different backgrounds. And coming to Romania, that even enforced it a bit more, because
Sure.
the I think the people of color make up like 0.0001%. Like it's
Wow.
actually 99.992%, Caucasian. So, I rarely see somebody who looks like me, but working in an environment, it's been quite welcoming. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, because
Mm.
coming here has actually changed my perspective on race relations. And I believe now it's just a mindset. So when I was in the UK, I had many problems with racism, and from school going into the workplace as well, going into universities as well, I was held back in different ways. But you become stronger for it. And then
Yeah.
when I came to Romania, it was a real eye opener, because I believed one set of ideas about some people who didn't look like me, and then when I came here, I was completely embraced. And I know that
Wow.
sounds a bit weird, but because there's no concept or idea about people of color here in Romania,
Mm.
you don't get that stigma, you don't get that discrimination,
I suppose
because
there's less
people are,
opportunity to stereotype in that way.
exactly, there's no stereotypes. So people are more curious. And what I found, that looking at from the outside to the UK, you realize that in the media, there are set representations of people of color,
Mm.
like, for example, good at sports or have done a crime, or, there's rarely many positive views of people of color in the UK in the media.
Mm.
But when you come here, there are no representations. So you find that people who are Caucasian, they don't have any concept of somebody who looks like me. So they're more open to discuss ideas and more open to find out who I really am. So what I've realized is that it's not about your actual skin color. It's actually the way you've been brought up, and the concepts and the ideas that have been taught to you through the media. And coming
Absolutely.
here, I've actually had to reassess how I see people who don't look like me.
Mm.
Not everybody is, biased. I think it's just a mental mindset of how you've been raised.
And how is that affecting that change in perspective into the work that you're doing right now when it comes to voice and development? One of the things that I picked up in our last video with Noel Silva, who was previous at NPR, was around this idea that when we look at voice as a technology, it could be seen as being almost kind of completely colorblind, to use that kind of term, like it's completely racially unbiased. But we do know that obviously actually a lot of our design paradigms come from people's upbringings. What we program into these things is how they
Mm.
then embody themselves. Is any of that thinking kind of changing for you right now, or how do you approach your development, trying to kind of create something that is
I,
truly kind of able to be accessed by anybody?
I believe that if you have multiple ideas from multiple different backgrounds, the actual end result becomes very diverse, and also richer for that matter. So, in every piece of work that I've done, I've tried to involve people from different backgrounds, so they have different perspectives. And I think that's the key to creating great voice experiences, is that, for example, one community of people, might see a phrase or a concept as offensive. I know that some concepts in the Asian community have a negative connotation that would be not negative in the Western community. So I think it's about making sure that at every step you have different voices that can look at this and say, well, okay, for a voice experience, where is this going to be used? Is it
Right.
global? And if so, it's a bit like I know that there were discussions around sonic branding and what that means. Not just in terms of the actual the sound, the audio, but also the different words that are used and the language. It's not just a straight translation from English to Cantonese, for example. There are different words which mean different things.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
know, so I think it's about having people looking at that experience and thinking, well, if this is a global voice experience, then it should have the input from different people who would be using this. So it's about basically just bringing people from different backgrounds to actually have an input into the end result.
You're so right, and I hadn't really thought about that. We've spoken a lot about the, obviously things like, the use of language, the use of grammar, different cultural references and things like that. But you bring up this really interesting topic around like different concepts and the way in which people might perceive things. I'm thinking more about like manners, or like how you introduce yourself, or how you might sign off a conversation. Those kind of moments. That does change actually. Context to context. I can think, as I've traveled in Asia or in Central Europe or even America. I've got American friends who, when the conversation is over, you just say, okay, bye, and they just hang up the phone. In the UK, it's like
Yeah.
that back and forth we always have, a
Yeah.
bye, okay, bye, see you, and
Yeah.
it's almost rude not to have that kind of
Mm.
slow end to a conversation like that. So you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. I haven't really thought about those concepts. Is that something you've had to think about in the design that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I've had to look at how people interact. So, for example, and that doesn't stop at like race. It also goes on to gender. Like, for example, the LGBTQT community, they have a different way of interacting. So it's looking at the users who will use the voice skill and actually saying, well, trying to make it as generic as possible. So not saying like. For example, if you're relating to a character in a game, not referencing it as him or her, trying to give people the ability to choose the gender of the player, maybe, or have a non-binary avatar. So it's just thinking about all the different ways that you can support the users, because at the end of the day, it's about making people comfortable, and it's about having that empathy about different users and having that open-mindedness, because I think a lot of the voice developers are so deep in the technical,
Right.
the code
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And then when they release the code and they release the voice experience, it doesn't work as well. And then they think, why? The code is perfect. It's
It's
efficient.
functional. It should
Yeah,
work, right?
exactly. But really, when we think about voice, it's actually a person who's using it. So if we start from that point and work back into the code, then it brings all those features and
Mm.
empathies into the for example, situational design. It brings it all the way from there. So, and developers, I think we're a bit guilty of. But I am myself. I was about thinking about the technical side before the human side. Like, for example, I'm working with a female developer in New Zealand, and she's taught me so much about how to onboard female users, and I was completely oblivious to that because I'm a male, and I'm not,
Yeah.
you know so I had to learn a lot from her. And in the same way, I believe that people of color can have an input into the dialogue design of voice experiences.
Yeah, because you're coming at it from again a different cultural context, maybe different, like particularly you mentioned the things like designing for kids and family, different
Yeah.
cultural attitudes
Hmm.
to raising children, to what is seen as educational, all those different attitudes come to play. I
Yeah.
wanted to also ask you, something more about now the kind of career side of things, and what can we do as an industry. We've seen a lot of response to the current Black Lives Matter movement around people not having access to the same opportunities, and that it not being a level playing field. And that starts at the earliest ages, right through
Mm.
education and into opportunities when it comes to employment. I particularly reference like Stephen Bartlett, who is the leader of Social Chain, one of the big development studios, actually come out of the north in Manchester in the past few years, and he was talking on Good Morning Britain this week about
Yeah, I saw that.
not having access to equal
Mm.
opportunities. What about for yourself? Like, what can we do to encourage kind of particularly young black men, for whom seem to be the most affected in many ways for this situation, into careers like voice development or into the
Mm.
boardroom, at our clients, for example?
So when I was growing up, I didn't see many role models who looked like me at all. So, there were a few sports people, but I wasn't very good at
Yeah.
sports. And as such, basically, I just followed the normal or the traditional route of going through, secondary education to university, and then coming out not knowing what I wanted to do. So for me, it was more about just trying everything. And I think if the doors are open to try different things, then you will find, what you're interested in. But in terms of what you said about, what needs to be done, should there be more representation in boardrooms? I believe so. But at the same time, I think there's a misconception about the Black Lives Matter movement. So yes, obviously people should be treated better, in terms of law and order, but at the same time, in terms of opportunity. And I sort of take a different view in this. So I've always tried to do my best. And yes, I've been held back, but that's always pushed me further. And
Right.
sometimes you can't, there's a saying, you can't boil the ocean, which means that you can't,
Yeah.
conquer everything. But at the same time, it's like finding that you're good at something and actually going for it with all your might. So I believe that yes, opportunities should be available equally to everybody, but at the same time, like, don't give me a handout because of my color of my skin. But at the same time, don't deny me an opportunity because of
Right.
my color of my skin. I really believe that people should be given the opportunity based on merit. So
Yeah.
yes, for example, there aren't representations of people of color in the media, but then isn't that down to people who look like me to be more vocal on social media, to be helping and reaching out people who are younger than myself? I had the idea that when I moved back to the UK, I really want to set up a once a month talk at different places to actually
Yeah.
go into schools and say, look, this is what I've done. I've moved from UK to Romania, which is the other side of Europe, the furthest east that you can get, and I've been able to succeed. So if I can do it, then it's down to me to have the responsibility to go back into my communities and say, look, this is me. I've done it. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got cousins who look at me and think, where's Romania? They have no idea where it is. And I have to point out it's actually here,
On the
like, all the
map.
way over there. Yeah. And they're like, why would you do that? I'm like, well, why not? I've always been somebody who says, why not?
Yeah.
I don't ask for handouts. I've never had. I've never, my mother always said to me, if you want something, go and get it. Don't let anybody stop you. And yes, you will hit hurdles because of your color. And that's the reality. You're never going to get rid of racism. And I think when we realize that, then we take responsibility to shine light on those who have succeeded. I'm not saying that I'm a role model at all. I'm just saying that I've done something that not many people have done.
Yeah. I think that makes you a role
So,
model, to be honest, Ethan. I think you've done a great job of doing
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But
And
in the voice space, I think what's great about the voice space is that there's no standards yet in terms of what a voice experience should look like. And it's still growing and it's still forming itself. So it's perfect for somebody who, comes from a different background to come in and say, well, how about this? And this works in my country, in India, or,
yeah.
in Japan. And I think that's what's attracting many different people around the world into this space, because there's no, glass ceilings or anything like that. From what I can see, I've spoken to the whole world last week.
Yeah.
So I think, it's amazing when you just sit
Literally
down.
one end to the other.
Yeah. India, New
Yeah.
Zealand, and the USA. I mean, and the UK, and it's amazing. So I think that, like, we also have a responsibility in the voice industry to say, well, look, this is what you can do, and it's regardless of, you know, where you come from, your background. You know, I've spoken to people who live in India who are using a Raspberry Pi to code.
Right,
So,
of course.
you know,
Yeah.
it
That's
doesn't
what they can
matter
get
that
their hands on. They're gonna
exactly.
do it, right?
So I believe it's some people use their color as an excuse to not, you know, go past that hurting phase. You know, I've been rejected and it hurts, yes, but at the same time, I'm taking it as a positive, and I'm just saying, well, I can't change my color, I can't,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, let my work speak for itself. I mean, I've done things like, for example, APL themes. You've seen that. I've done things like that that nobody's thought of, nobody's done before, and nobody's given me the permission. I've just gone and done it.
Yeah, you've
I
seen the
don't need,
opportunity and you've gone for
yeah,
it. And maybe that is, as you say, because there isn't a, there isn't a kind of confirmation bias that is already there, that you're seeing that, well, I'm that way, so I have to follow that
yeah,
structure, because you're saying it's
yeah,
this open pathway. And I do agree with you to, there is something about, whatever challenges, whatever adversity we're coming against, whether that's our race, our religion, our background, or whatever that might be, there's an individual responsibility to try and push through with that. But I think there's
yeah,
also still a collective responsibility for those that are in that position of employers and people that are creating opportunities. I suppose to round out our conversation, I'll ask you the same thing that I asked Noelle Silver in our previous episode, was if you were to give advice to someone like myself or others that are, kind of people from Caucasian backgrounds leading tech businesses, and particularly in this space right now, what advice would you give to people like us who can be giving these opportunities, who can be making a way for maybe the next generation of developers from different backgrounds to come to the fore?
I would say that if you're not looking at diverse talent from, you know, different backgrounds, your business is going to suffer, because you're only limiting yourself to the input from a certain set of people.
Yeah.
Not to say that those certain set of people are not talented, but the diversity of thought and the diversity of skills and talents and viewpoints can really enrich your business and drive it forward. That's not to say that you should, you know, find the you know, the nearest black person and then, or, you know, bring them in. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you see talent, see it for what it is, and not as, okay, I need to tick the diversity box. You know, I think people of color really want to be appreciated for more than their color and what they can actually do. And by having that diversity of thought, your ideas and your business, your approaches to different clients would be different. And also, if you're approaching clients in, for example, South America, you know, there's a different way of doing business. So having somebody who has a viewpoint of the Latin American culture would be advantageous to your business and maybe bring you more clients. In the same way that, for example, if you're moving into the, you know, like the African continent, you know, having that viewport, which you would never be able to get, you know, and you've got somebody who's got the talents of developing skills or strategy or, you know, anything along those lines, and having that viewpoint opens up a lot more doors as well.
Absolutely.
And I think it
That's
goes
so
back
powerful.
to, yeah, so I think it goes back to like just having that awareness that, you know, diversity in teams is really important. Otherwise your ideas stay the same, you don't change, you don't grow, and you don't get challenged for what you're doing. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's such a good place for us to kind of wrap this conversation on. What you just said there is, that if you're not thinking about diversity, your business is going to suffer. I mean, like,
Mm.
if anyone's watching this right now and you're not hearing that point, hear it loud and clear. I think that is the big takeaway that I'm having from these conversations, is that diversity of thought. You're absolutely right. It's those concepts. It's not just about who's around the table and that,
Mm.
just making sure that you've ticked those boxes, but it is the real actual historical background that people bring from different points of view. So I want to wrap that conversation around
Yep.
that point. Ethan, thank you so much for taking
Yeah,
the
you're
time. If
welcome.
people want to get in touch with you or want to follow you somewhere else, where can they do that?
Yep. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm posting a lot on LinkedIn, or on Twitter. You can find me there. And I'm also going to be on visiting Voice Global as well. So yeah.
Great. Well, we look forward to hearing all your input around Voice Global, and thanks for continuing to do what you're doing there in Romania. And we look forward to, at some point or other, you'll be able to get back to the UK when the
Definitely.
quarantines lift.
Yeah,
All right, Ethan
hopefully.
Richardson, thanks so much for joining me
Thank
on
you.
another episode of Voice Coffee Break. And for those of you watching, if you want to find out more about Ethan, do check him out on social media. And wherever you're watching this video, if you've got a comment, if you want to add to this debate, leave a like, leave a comment, and maybe share this with your own teams, and let's continue this conversation over the next couple of episodes as we continue to look at how diversity can really challenge our thinking and build our businesses in the world of voice. For now, thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter from Vixen Labs.